Welcome to the Heroic Investing Show. As first responders, we risk our lives every day. Our financial security is under attack. Our pensions are in a state of emergency. A single on-duty incident can alter or erase our earning potential instantly and forever. We are the heroes of society. We are self-reliant and we need to take care of our own financial future. The Heroic Investing Show is our toolkit of business and investing tactics on our mission to financial freedom.
Hello and welcome to episode 158 of the Heroic Investing Show. This is a podcast for first responders, members of the military, veterans, and anyone looking to improve their financial future and gain some freedom with their time. We help America's heroes build passive income, build their startup business, and safely grow wealth through real estate and other alternative investments. We help current and prior first responders put protections and systems in place to enable them to build a life where they can focus on their passion, that service or product that they are uniquely gifted to share with the world and be compensated from through a better life of their own. My name is Gary Pinkerton. I co-host this show with Jason Hartman, and today's show is coming to you from Jason. Jason is talking with land trust specialist Randy Hughes, and Randy has a long history of investing in single-family homes himself. He normally will use a commercial loan or more of a local bank loan, and he will title the properties in the name of a land trust. So Randy teaches a course on this. He's got a website to help facilitate individuals doing this themselves. I don't personally use land trusts, although I've looked into them numerous times. I do have other trusts in my family, so revocable trusts and irrevocable trusts. And I help a lot of my clients for their families, for their legacy planning, for their estates, connect them up with trusted advisors that will help them through that process. Again, though, a land trust is a special beast, and Randy gets into that quite a bit. I do have plenty of clients and friends, real estate investing friends, who have either used this or considered using land trusts. Sometimes we get into this, is A or B better, right? A being a land trust and B being LLCs or other asset protection entities. And personally, I have stuck with B in this example. I have always used LLCs, limited liability companies. And I do that is because from my non-licensed, non-estate attorney licensed view and understanding after studying this quite a bit, LLCs, asset protection structures or entities, their purpose is to build a wall around your assets. And so the primary purpose is to protect you and your family from your assets. So if an individual at one of your properties sues and you have it in an LLC, or other type of asset protection entity with a wall up around it, them winning a judgment will, in almost every state, I believe in every state actually, will protect you from them taking not just your rental property and what's in that LLC, but also everything that's out on the outside, your family, your house, your assets. Some states do a better job than others in protecting your property from an attack from the other direction, right? And Garrett Sutton talks very, very well about this in his books and in his interviews that he's done on Jason's show and some that I've ran here on the Heroic Investing Show. That's called the outside threat, right? So let's say that somebody gets hurt in my swimming pool and they want all of my assets and they win a judgment. The question is, can they get the things that are in my LLCs? And that comes down to how good of protection that the LLC structure I have built, how good that wall is from attacks from the outside. And a lot of states, frankly, do not have great protection from the outside. And so states like Wyoming and Nevada and Delaware and states like that do have better protection in that direction. And then, of course, in the great state of California, those of you who are investing from there, you have all kinds of pretty onerous tax impacts, and you need to make sure you understand how many times am I going to have to pay the $800 state tax for California, and that really depends on how you set your structure up. So certainly in that state, but I would say in any state, it is very much to your advantage. If you're considering getting asset protection entities in place, make sure you talk to somebody who's not just knowledgeable in the concept, but knowledgeable in your state. While I don't get paid at all from these guys, I can tell you that all of my asset protection, all of my recent asset protection has been done through Corporate Direct and Garrett Sutton's team there. And so I'd be happy to set you up with a connection that way. So that's entity protection, asset protection. And So I believe in building up walls. The other approach, which can be used hand in hand with this, is privacy, right? So if they don't know that you own the asset, if they don't know who owns the rental property, then it's probably harder to figure out who to sue. I think one thing that every attorney who has done any litigation would agree with or would say is that if there's enough money involved, if there's enough interest on the part of the plaintiff, and if there's enough incentive to their lawyers, they'll find you and they will get through this roadblock that's been put up, which is we don't know who owns the thing, right? I mean, if they think you own it, then all they have to do is put you on the witness stand and ask, do you own it? And then you get to decide if you want to go to prison for perjury or if you want to just say, yes, I own it. Then it comes down to how well is it protected? How big is the wall, right? So the cloud of secrecy is really the trust, the land trust. And then there's the wall and how good have you protected the wall with corporate formalities and things like that. So this discussion between Jason and Randy Hughes is about the land trust side of it, the maintaining the privacy side of it. As I mentioned, I haven't personally gone down the path of adding this to the LLCs. Some people use this instead of the LLCs. And personally, I think that's like flying or driving without safety precautions. You're assuming that the bad thing won't happen, meaning that they won't figure out who you are. I believe you at least have to have estate protection in place or asset protection in place, get the wall in place. And if you want to kind of make that wall so that it's not visible as an additional layer, that could be helpful and it may be necessary in sometimes. I won't go down too far down the path of why I have chosen not to use land trust myself, but I do have lots of clients who use it and lots of clients who ask me about it. And so I thought it would be helpful and useful to have a discussion or to listen to Jason ask questions about the tax impact, about the recording aspects of it, how difficult is it to operate. This really is a very good explanation over 20 minutes or so of how you execute these. And there's a great resource, a course and website that Randy Hughes talks about. So I think you'll get a lot out of this. Hopefully my little introduction there helped set the stage for kind of how I approach this. And I think that, you should listen to Randy. You should check out his website as well as talk to an attorney who understands your state and make the decision based on how large you feel the risk is, how much money you're talking about, and really how big the asset is, right? So if you have, I agree with Jason absolutely that the biggest risk here is that people get so caught up in having to get these asset protection structures in place that they don't ever get the property, right? I've talked to plenty of people who said, I'm planning to get the property. I haven't gone into contract yet because I got to get my trust set up or I got to get my LLCs set up. And there's nothing to protect there yet. Just getting your first little property and getting the experience under your belt, having that 1 to 2 years or 10 years worth of experience before you start worrying too much about protecting what's not even there yet, I believe is a much, much better idea. Many people spend their whole investing career, their whole adult life trying to, preparing, educating themselves on getting started. The best education comes from getting started. And it doesn't mean that you get absolutely wiped out. It means that you learn how I could have done it better here and there, and you're on to number 2 and 3 and 4 and improving things where often the other people have not yet started. So that's my advice for you is get out there and get started. Do it conservatively the first time, but get the experience, get that experience clock going for yourself. But this is just another tool along with asset protection stuff that we've heard from Garrett Sutton and others, and tax benefits, just a lot of other education that you can do in the background. But please don't let investigating this idea hold you back from getting started. So with that, here are Jason Hartman and Randy Hughes.
My pleasure to welcome Randy Hughes to the show. He is an expert in land trust and, of course, real estate investing. He's been investing for about 40 years. He's been using land trust for about 30 of those 40 years. And we're going to learn about his techniques today. Randy, welcome. How are you?
Thank you. I'm very good.
Good. Tell us about your investing experience first. Have you always invested in, just single-family homes, or have you done other stuff?
Well, I have done other things. I do have a commercial building, and I've tried restaurants and other types of
tough
businesses
business, yeah.
as well as real estate. But to tell you the truth, I got pretty good at losing money in everything except real estate. So I over the years, I evolved into just the single-family house as my one and only form of investing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. So the single-family home has really been the only tried and true investment for you then, it sounds like, huh?
Yeah, it really has. I mean, and I know we're in difficult times right now as it relates to single-family homes, but there are good times in the future. It doesn't seem like it right now, but there will be. The market will come back.
Oh, listen, I tell you, you don't have to say that on my show. I think this is a phenomenal time. What people don't realize so many times, Randy, as you well know, is that income property is a multidimensional asset class. It's not just about appreciation. You can make a fortune just off cash flow. I mean, the cash-on-cash returns, the value could go to zero. And as long as you're getting that rent and maintaining your expenses where they should be, I mean, the cash-on-cash returns on some of our properties are between 13 and 18% without any appreciation. And then you get tax benefits to boot. And I mean, this is a phenomenal time. Anyway,
well,
comments on that?
I'm glad you mentioned that because, the other benefit that you can count on, even though you cannot count on appreciation, but you can count on amortization.
Mm-hmm. Of your loans, you mean?
If you want to be a millionaire, go out and borrow $1 million and have somebody else pay it off for you, and that's your tenants, and you'll be a millionaire if you never have any appreciation the rest of your life.
Yep, I agree.
There are lots of reasons to buy, and your listeners are going to look back. I predict in 10 years they're going to look back and say, man, I wish we would have bought more back then in those days when the prices were so low.
Yep, that's for sure. And when the interest rates were so low, and I don't think it's going to take 10 years for them to look back regretfully at missing opportunities. So I hope they don't miss opportunities because the opportunities are pretty phenomenal now, no question about it. And I think, Randy, what this really comes down to is not just an issue of price, of course, but of the price of financing. And like you said, if you want to be a millionaire, just borrow $1 million and outsource the debt to your tenants. Let them pay it off for you, and that's going to be paid off, and then you will have gained $1 million, even if you don't have positive cash flow, if you don't have tax benefits, which of course you do have all this great stuff, if you don't have appreciation, which you will as well. So with land trust, I mean, why should this be attractive to people?
Well, especially in this market, and I think a lot of people have come to realize the importance of privacy. And a land trust by itself is not a great asset protection tool, but it is a great privacy tool. And I use corporations and LLCs and all these other entities that investors and their attorneys recommend, but I always start with a land trust entitled to the real estate first because it hides ownership, it allows for a private transaction. In fact, there's so many benefits. I wrote a booklet called 50 Reasons to Use a Land Trust. And if your listeners would like me to send that to them for free, I would be glad to do that. Just send me an email. It's randy@realestateforprofit.com. That's realestate4, F-O-R, profit.com. And put in the subject line, 50 Reasons to Use a Land Trust.
So tell us what some of those reasons are.
Well, privacy certainly is the first thing because if nobody knows you own it, you can operate at the trust level, which is a great level to operate at instead of everybody tracking your every movement through the courthouse records. And whenever you sign a mortgage, it gets recorded in your name, then your competitors and your creditors and everybody else on the planet can track your activity. So the first step in asset protection is privacy, and the land trust gives you that privacy.
Well, let's talk about that, though. On the privacy note, and maybe now we have to take a break from the reasons for just a moment here, and we'll get back to those. What is a land trust? I mean, how do you set it up? People can have some degree of privacy inside of other entities like LLCs, especially if they're in the privacy-favorable states like Nevada. But what is a land trust? Tell us what that is. And can you borrow money in it?
Yes, it's nothing more than a few pieces of paper. A land trust is two documents. One is the trust agreement that does not get recorded, and that's the agreement between the trustee and the beneficiary. And the other document is the deed in trust, and that does get recorded just like any other deed, and that's what funds the trust. So you can set up a trust by signing a land trust agreement and have nothing in it. But if you then record your deed for the property to the trust, now you've funded the trust, and there is a piece of real estate in there. Now, it's that simple. You record a deed. Now, let's go back to what you just said about other entities. Yes, you could put your real estate into a Nevada LLC, but just think about that logically. What if you own more than one piece of real estate? Are you going to have the title held in one entity, or do you want to put every piece of real estate you own in a separate entity to insulate it from the other entities, the other properties? I advise my students to put every piece of real estate into its own separate land trust. Don't put anything else in that trust. And just from a logical standpoint, think about it. If I was going to attack you, and I know you have one trust with everything in it, and I attack just one property in that trust that's got 10 properties in it, and I win a judgment against you, I've got that whole trust all tied up, even though the problem only related to one property. You've just tied up 10 properties.
Okay, so separation and firewalling. I mean,
right.
Some people do that with multiple LLCs, or they do it with a series LLC that's got 16 parts to it. And so that certainly makes sense, segmentation. But the thing I'm concerned about, and this is really the problem like with LLCs, and I find, Randy, it's unbelievable how many investors, I just think they just overcomplicate a lot of this stuff. They'll come to one of my live events, they'll be listening to the show, and they'll somehow ask me, maybe at a break at a live event or whatever, well, I'm being told that I should set up a couple different LLCs and all this stuff. And I say, look, do you own any property? No. They're just starting out. They're like beginning investors, and they want to put the cart before the horse and worry about all this asset protection stuff. And with the LLCs, what they don't realize is that financing becomes a problem, insurance becomes a problem. Because I've got an LLC that I buy single-family homes in, and I got to tell you, the only reason I have it is because it's inside my IRA, and I want it self-directed like that. But it's a hassle every time I buy one of those because insurance costs a lot more. There aren't many insurance companies that want to write insurance in the name of an LLC. Now, if you do properties that are over 4 units, that classifies them as commercial properties. So if it's a 5-plex or a 200-unit apartment complex, then it's easy because all of the lenders, all of the insurance companies expect you to use entities. But in these single-family homes, it's just problematic, or a triplex or a duplex. So does the trust solve that problem?
Well, yes and no. Let me briefly explain. If you're financing that piece of property through a loan that's got to qualify for the secondary market guidelines, in other words, you're going to Bank of America or Chase or any of the big boys and you're getting a loan, they are going to make that loan subject to the secondary market guidelines. And those guidelines say you cannot close a deal using a land trust. You can put it in the trust the day after closing, but you've got to be there and you sign all the documents the day of closing. So, of course, you're limited to 9 or 10 of those loans, and then it doesn't matter if you want to buy an 11th piece of property, you can't qualify for a secondary market loan anyway. So now you're forced to go to the commercial lender, the portfolio lender, and those are the guys I like anyway because they make their own guidelines and they don't have to meet all these huge federal government standards. And they will let you close taking title directly from the seller to your trust, which keeps your name out of the chain of title. And that's another key element to asset protection, is to never take title to the property. Now, in reference to financing, let's look at the other side of it. Let's say you're going to sell the property and you want to sell on a contract and it's in an LLC. That presents an entirely different set of problems, whereas if you have it in a separate land trust, you can sell the beneficial interest on a contract, and if default occurs, you can repossess that beneficial interest instead of having to foreclose, which will save you at least a year in the judicial system. And for the professional crook, they will string you out for a year, and then the day before foreclosure, they'll declare bankruptcy and string it out another 6 months. That doesn't happen when you sell the beneficial interest in the land trust, and that's one of the big reasons to use these trusts, especially if you're ever going to be selling property on a contract.
So financing, though, you can't do financing, mainstream financing through a bank and use the trust, right?
Not if they're going to sell the loan in the secondary market.
Okay, so meaning they sell it to Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, et cetera. So what about insurance?
Insurance is, and I explain this, I've got a home study course where I've got a whole chapter on how to insure a land trust, but the short version is the insurance policy needs to be in the name of the owner of the property, which sounds logical. Well, the owner of the property is the trustee, because when you put your property in the land trust, the trustee has full legal and equitable title to the real estate. So sometimes the difficult part is making your agent understand that you are not the owner, that the trustee is the owner, and that the named insured on the policy needs to be the trustee. And then we go take it a step further and we say the trustee and all beneficiaries as their interest may appear. That prevents you from having to put your name on the policy as a beneficiary and exposing your privacy element. So it works like a dream, but sometimes it takes hitting your agent over the head with a hammer to get him to understand it. But the bigger companies, State Farm, Westfield Insurance, Cincinnati Insurance, they all understand how the game works, and it's not a problem.
Okay. And what if someone listening has properties now and they want to put them into a trust? Would that trigger a tax liability? Would it trigger a due on sale clause? Would it trigger any other financing or insurance problems? Or maybe like the leases on the properties need to be rewritten too, because now it's a different entity they're paying. Do you set up a bank account for your trust? Lots of questions there.
Yeah, just the mechanics, yeah. No, we don't set up specific accounts for each trust. You could if you wanted to, but they're still going to ask for your personal Social Security number from the bank when you open those accounts. A land trust is a pass-through entity in the eyes of the IRS. That means you don't get an FEIN number for it. You do not file a tax return for it. You file all the information from that property that's in the trust directly onto your 1040 tax return, Schedule E, the same place where you had it before you put it in trust. That same information went on your Schedule E. It will continue to go on your Schedule E after you put it in a trust, because the trust is a pass-through entity. In reference to financing, when you get a loan with a trust, the trustee signs the mortgage. That gets recorded in the name of the trustee. The beneficiary typically will sign either a note or a guarantee that the banker keeps in his file and does not get recorded, so his anonymity can be continued as it relates to that property. What's really interesting about this is that one of the byproducts that you don't think about until you've done a few of these is if you run Jason's credit report, and everything he's ever bought, he bought in the name of a trust, that debt isn't going to show up on your credit report.
Right.
And that might make your mind wander.
Yeah, that's mostly good. It's bad in the sense that if you want to establish more credit that you're paying on, you want it to show up, actually. That'll improve your FICO score. But who are those loans through? They're not going to be major bank loans anyway, so they're going to be private financing. I mean, who are you going to get to finance for the trust?
A regional bank.
Okay.
A regional bank. I live in the Midwest. I love Midwest banks that are, for example, out in the country. You're driving down the road and you see a bank come up out of the ground and you stop in and meet the president, shake his hand. They make the loan to you, to your trust. You guarantee it. And there are lots of regional banks. You don't have to be in the Midwest. There are lots of them in California and Florida and all over. I just don't deal with the big boys, the Chase, the Bank of America, because they've got too stringent of guidelines. And backing up a little bit to answer your question about people that already have property in their name, Jason, I get this question all the time. Well, should I even bother taking it out of my name if it's already in my name? And the answer is yes, because of those 50 reasons to use a land trust. You may miss out on one of them because you didn't put it into the trust from day one, but you got 49 other reasons to still use a land trust. For example, selling the property on a contract, or avoiding due on sale, or avoiding reassessment upon sale. If I sell you the beneficial interest in a land trust, Jason, that does not get recorded anywhere. So if I sold it to you for more money than I paid for it, the taxing body isn't aware of that to reassess and increase your real estate taxes.
So your property taxes is what you're talking about, yeah. But,
that's right.
But even if they're not aware of it, don't you have to tell them? Don't you have to proactively tell them, or you might get in trouble?
Well, it depends on what state you're in. Some states do have that rule. They have that law that like in Florida, they've got the law there. In Illinois, they have that law. But most states don't have that law. So it just depends on what state you're in.
Okay. So there were 49 other reasons that we didn't even discuss yet. Give us a few of your favorites.
Well, I like the ease of transferability and the ease of linking these trusts together with other entities. From a transferability standpoint, as I mentioned, I could sell you the beneficial interest in my land trust, and we could do that deal this afternoon, and we don't have to go run down to the courthouse. Nobody knows what you paid for it. So if I'm selling it for more than I paid for it, that profit is not made public. It's a one-page document to assign that beneficial interest to you when you buy it from me. And the title remains in the same trustee's name, although you could change it if you wanted to as the new beneficiary. You could certainly change that the trustee if you want to, or just keep my trustee. So very easy to do transactions that are below the surface where people aren't tracking it. And we talked about the linking together of land trusts with other entities. I like LLCs. I like the Series LLC. I like Nevada corporations. I like Wyoming LLCs. But I don't title anything in the name of those LLCs or corporations. The title goes first into a land trust, then the beneficiary of the land trust might be my Delaware Series LLC.
Now, why do you do that?
Why?
Just have two layers?
Well,
tell us about that.
Number one is asset protection. I've got another layer. And when you really get into the study of this subject, which I teach, I have a basic course and an advanced course on my website. In the advanced material, we get into the benefits of having multiple layers of ownership. But one really interesting point here is I had a seminar the other day in San Francisco, and right in front center was a CPA. And he and I tangled right away over the subject of, do I have to register my LLC in California if it's the beneficiary of a land trust that owns property in California? Now, if you title California real estate into a LLC, directly into the name of the LLC, you have to register that LLC in California, no matter where the LLC is domiciled, and pay the wonderful $800 a year that they're going to assess to you in California.
California is the rip-off state of the universe.
That's true.
The Socialist Republic of California.
If you title that California real estate into a California land trust, and then the beneficiary of the land trust is your Delaware LLC, you do not have to register it in California. That just saves you $800 a year. Here's the reason, and it just took about 2 hours, and finally the accountant raised his hand. He said, you know what, I've been thinking about this, and you're right, Randy. The reason why is the beneficiary of the land trust is not doing business in California. The trustee is doing business because he owns real estate in California, but the trustee of a land trust is not required to be registered in the state of California or any other state. You see, the big picture here, Jason, is there's no federal land trust law. It's all state by state, and some states have better laws than others. And you can set up a Virginia land trust, for example, to hold title to property in California. And from an asset protection standpoint, now you're really getting the leg up because you've now taken it out of state. The legal issue has now gone out of state instead of being an in-state issue during a lawsuit. So linking these trusts together with other entities is very, very valuable to you from an asset protection and privacy standpoint.
Let me take a brief pause. We'll be back in just a minute. Did you know that you can call into the Creating Wealth Show? Yes, you can call me and talk to me direct for later broadcast on the show. The number is 949-200-8009 or via Skype, Jason Hartman, ROI. Please make sure you have a good connection when you call, get your questions answered, participate in the show, and share your experiences with other investors. Call in 949-200-8009 or Skype, Jason Hartman, ROI, and participate in the Creating Wealth Show. On the credit issue, what you said about credit, how it doesn't show up on your credit report, I mean, assuming you can get financing, which you say you can with regional banks and such. Assuming you can get financing, it doesn't show up on your credit report. That was when you said that, it was reminiscent of, I've heard those people talk about like establishing business credit, corporate credit. A lot of those things I believe are scams.
I don't think that works.
Yeah,
I don't think that works either.
I think it's kind of like something where there's some truth to it, and it could work in certain cases. But one thing I do know about it is that if you get the business credit, you do have to guarantee it the way you said. With the land trust, same thing. And it doesn't show up on your credit report as debt, which is good and bad depending on where you are and how you need to manage your FICO score. But if you default, it does show up on your credit report. So the good part, when you're paying the debts, never shows up. But the bad part, when you default on the debt, does show up. So, that's just sort of a little nuance.
Well, yeah. Eventually it would show up. Now, the foreclosure wouldn't show up in your name. It would show up in the trustee's name if you were being foreclosed on.
Well, but just make a distinction there, if you would. That means the foreclosure wouldn't show up in the county records under your name, but it'll still show up in your credit report, right?
Well, it depends on what you signed. If you signed a guarantee, then they have to go through the entire foreclosure process, and then when the dust settles, they come after you as the guarantor. And if you don't pay that, they can get a judgment against you in court and then collect on the judgment. So the judgment would show up as a filing at the courthouse ultimately, but the foreclosure doesn't because you never signed anything to be foreclosed on.
Okay. All right. Interesting. Okay. What else should people know?
Oh, gosh. Land trusts can be very beneficial from a estate planning standpoint. For example, they help you avoid probate. Typically, if you die, your assets are going to be probated and tied up in court, and an attorney charging attorney's fees to settle the estate. But if you own a piece of real estate in a land trust and you are the beneficiary, Jason's the primary beneficiary, and Jason makes his 20-year-old son the successor beneficiary. When Jason dies, that moment that Jason dies, his 20-year-old son becomes the beneficiary. It doesn't have to go through probate. It's automatic.
Right. So you don't pay the government and the lawyers a bunch of money. That's good. There are so many different types of trusts that you hear about. You hear about a revocable trust, an irrevocable trust, a living trust, an inter vivos trust, same thing, a spendthrift trust. I mean, there's like a zillion names for these things, but trusts there's really just one kind of trust, right? And then why do they get those other names tacked on to them?
Well, that's a very good point, and that's one of the reasons why it's so difficult to get accurate land trust information anywhere, let alone from an attorney. Number one, they don't teach lawyers trust law in law school, and after law school, most lawyers don't learn it because there's not a lot of money in it, and I don't blame them for that. But consequently, it's very difficult to find anybody that can help you set up and administer your own land trust. Now, here's where the confusion comes in, Jason. Those attorneys and practitioners and advisors that do study trust laws study about most every other kind of trust other than the land trust. And you can almost divide the world into all those other trusts and land trusts.
Oh, okay.
Here's how to understand the difference. All the other trusts other than land trusts are typically trustee-driven. And what that means is the trustee makes the decisions as to what goes on with the property in the trust. And there's a fiduciary relationship there between the trustee and the beneficiary. He's got to look out for that beneficiary's financial interests, or he can be in legal trouble. The land trust is beneficiary-driven, That means the beneficiary makes all the decisions. The trustee doesn't do anything unless he's directed in writing to do so by the beneficiary. And that's the significant difference between a land trust and other trusts. In addition, land trusts are for real estate and real estate-related assets like a mortgage or a contract of sale or an option on real estate. And, of course, apartment buildings, office buildings, condominiums, single-family houses, all types of real estate go into a land trust. You don't put a motorhome in a land trust. Now, having said that, I wouldn't take title to a motorhome either in my name. In fact, in my advanced course material, I provide a very sophisticated personal property trust because I would advise everybody to hold their personal property in separate personal property trusts as well. So your car goes in one trust, your boat goes in another, your shotgun, your ladder, anything with liability to it should be in its own separate personal property trust. And the beneficial interest of a land trust is personal property. So, for example, you could even hold the beneficial interest in your land trust, not in your name personally, Jason, but in Jason's personal property trust number 234, and that adds another layer. So, it just depends on how sophisticated you want to get. You don't have to get real fancy to at least get the anonymity factor. But I would really encourage your listeners to think seriously about getting everything out of their name, getting it into separate trusts, and then either being the beneficiary directly or having one of their entities being the beneficiary of these trusts.
Now, how much does it cost to set up each trust, or is it basically nothing to do it? Because they're not entities. Yeah. They're not recorded at a certain state. There's no filing fee, right? Because you don't record a trust.
The only cost, Jason, is the cost to record the deed. Now, your listeners need to learn how to do this and learn from somebody that knows what they're doing. And that's why I put together a home study course that can be found on my website at realestateforprofit.com, realestateforprofit.com. They can go there and they can get the basic course, they can get the advanced course, or a complete package, which is the basic and advanced together. And that's all they'll ever spend the rest of their lives on land trusts, because that teaches them everything they need to know, and it gives them all the forms they need. And from there on out, the only continuing cost will be the cost of recording that deed, maybe $20-25. Other than that, they just load it up on their computer and they spit these things out all day long.
Who records the deeds for you? Your escrow officer, your title officer, or who can you get to do it?
Well, it depends on the transaction. Sometimes I'll record it. Sometimes my attorney will record it. And sometimes Chicago Title, who is a company I use exclusively, they'll record it. So it really doesn't matter who does it as long as it gets done.
All right. Well, anything else you want people to know in closing, Randy?
Yeah, I would like to close with the land trusts are not as difficult as people like to make them. They are, my course guide, for example, is 106 pages. It's not a lot of legalese. It's written in down-to-earth, easy-to-understand language. You can learn this stuff. If you're a real estate investor and you understand that, you can certainly understand this, and it'll really set you apart from the whole rest of the town that you're dealing in. Your competitors won't be able to track you. Nobody will know what you're doing, and it's just a nice feeling. You go to bed at night, and your head hits the pillow, and you can go to sleep not worrying about what's going on at the courthouse with everything that you've signed and been recorded, and people tracking what you're doing and following your every move. I think it's important as a real estate investor to do things on a confidential basis, and certainly, you need to add. The more property you get, the more net worth you get. You need to add the asset protection element, and that's where you learn how to link these trusts with other entities. And so the land trust gives you the privacy, The other entities gives you the asset protection, and you get the best of both worlds.
And Randy, I guess that leaves room for one more question in closing here, is that since privacy is the main benefit, any suggestions on naming these trusts? Because this name will be public record, and so it should not be the Hartman Family Trust, right? It should be something generic.
Jason, I'm so glad you brought that up. I could talk about trusts for days at a time, but I have a whole chapter in my course material, one whole chapter on how to name your trust. Because so many attorneys that will help you set up a land trust will say, all right, you got 10 single-family houses, let's dump them all into this one land trust, and let's name this the Randy Hughes Land Trust.
Yeah, not good.
Not good. I've even seen, Jason, Social Security numbers put in the name of a land trust.
Oh, my gosh.
And then record it.
Wow.
So, yeah, there's a lot to just the name. And let me give you a quick example. If you were looking to sue a trust for whatever reason it might be, and you looked up and the name of the owner of this property was the California State Disabled Children's Trust, you might think twice before you'd want to sue that trust.
Oh, interesting point.
You certainly would certainly set you off balance from day one, as opposed to if I looked up the name of the trust was the Jason Trust, I'd say, hey, I got the right guy, I'm going after him. But you can name these trusts whatever you want to, as long as you don't infringe on copyrights.
Yeah, or trademarks.
So, I could name it the Florida State Retirement Fund.
Huh.
I could call it the Chicago Lawyers Investment Account.
Oh boy, they're not going to want to see that one.
No. I wouldn't think you'd want to take them on. So there's a lot of psychology behind just naming it, and then there's more psychology behind the number of the trust. Because I teach people to name and number their trust, and we don't just number them 1, 2, 3, 4, or like a lot of attorneys do. They'll say put the address of the property in the name of the trust. Well, that's really stupid. But let's think in reverse here. Let's put a little reverse English on that thought process. What if we name the trust the address of a property that's not in the trust? So if the property that's in the trust is on 123 Vine Street, what if we named it the 234 Harrison Avenue Trust? That might really throw you off, and certainly make your attorney run up another $400 or $500 legal bill for you to pay just trying to figure that one out. So unfortunately, the legal system in America has run amok. It's not about who's right and who's wrong. O.J. Simpson proved that to everybody. It's a matter of who's got the deepest pockets and who understands the legal system. And I'm not teaching people this information to have them take advantage of anyone, but I do want them to learn how to defend themselves against what I call the terrorists of the 21st century, and that is the contingency fee lawyer. That's where you're going to get yourself in trouble. And that's who we're trying to throw the dogs off on.
Good stuff. Well, Randy Hughes, thanks so much for this lesson today. Very interesting and very good to have this knowledge. And everybody, I hope you'll take advantage of it. You already gave out your website so people know where to learn more. Thank you again, Randy. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jason. Take care.
Thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes. Be sure to check out the show's specific website and our general website, hartmanmedia.com, for appropriate disclaimers and terms of service. Remember that guest opinions are their own, and if you require specific legal or tax advice or advice in any other specialized area, please consult an appropriate professional. And we also very much appreciate you reviewing the show. Please go to iTunes or Stitcher Radio or whatever platform you're using and write a review for the show. We would very much appreciate that. And be sure to make it official and subscribe so you do not miss any episodes. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.